I'm always reluctant to play this song at any time on the show because I don't know about you, but when I hear Eye of the Tiger by Survivor, I just think I have to punch somebody in the face. And I'm not the kind of guy that would punch somebody in the face, at least not physically, maybe verbally from time to time. Depends on your perspective. But we're not here to fight. We get along and we play some music at the start of every show that has some significance on this day in music history. And as I'm sure you know, Sylvester Stallone commissioned that very song by Survivor as the title theme to the movie Rocky III, hence my reference to punching people in the face when I hear it. Not that I do that. Not that I ever have. The song actually received an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song. It would go on to sell more than 5 million copies. And on this day in 1982, 43 years ago, this July the 31st, Eye of the Tiger was at number 1 on the U.S. music charts. And so we play it for you to begin our show today. Good morning. I hope you're doing well. And if I may be so bold as to suggest, even if you're not doing particularly well today, maybe things are just a little bit off, look on the bright side. You could be Conestoga College. I mean, is there an institution in our community that could use some good news more than Conestoga College? Where to begin? Enrollment is down. Layoffs are happening across the board. The school has been under fire for well over a year since the president of Conestoga College used some salty language to describe a fellow college president. There's been much discussion about the merits of the $100,000 plus pay increase the president of Conestoga College got, who's now earning more than $600,000 a year, which, yes, Virginia, is more than the prime minister of this country. And on the front page of today's Waterloo Region Record, those plans to expand the empire of Conestoga College and create a new campus in downtown Guelph. Well, those plans are currently on pause. I'm curious about this. I was curious about the surplus itself as it accumulated into the hundreds of millions of dollars. But where's the surplus now? Like, did you burn through it? Anyway, tough times. That's all I'm saying. If there's any institution in this community that could use some good news, it is Conestoga College. Of that, there is no dispute. All right, let's get to your Farwell Show 5 for this Thursday morning, the 31st of July. Number 1, the heat has definitely been on this month in the region.
We had 10 days where the temperature hit 30 degrees or warmer compared to the average of 4 days. And obviously, we still have today to go to officially calculate where temperatures will finish for this month. But unofficially, looks like on average, we were about 2 degrees warmer this July.
570s weather specialist Alistair Alders says the daytime high was never below 20 degrees this month. And this July was one of the warmest we have felt in a decade. This past Monday, the 28th, was the hottest day so far this year at 33.1 degrees. Number 2, Canada will recognize a Palestinian state in the upcoming United Nations General Assembly. The announcement comes days after French President Emmanuel Macron said his country would become the first major Western power to recognize a Palestinian state in September. Prime Minister Carney says he did not consult the U.S. on this decision.
The United States is the essential partner in peace in the Middle East and in many parts of the world. And we've seen that demonstrated. The president does take a direct interest in resolving conflicts and has with respect to a broader set of developments in the Middle East. So again, the United States, this president will play and continue to play a central role. Others have responsibilities, Canada included, responsibilities on the humanitarian side, responsibilities with governance and other aspects that we're supporting. And we make our own independent foreign policy positions. And when we see opportunities, when we see necessity, which is what we see in this case, given the retreat of the prospect of a two-state solution because of the facts on the ground, as I explained, when we see that possibility and we see the combination of an ability to influence because of our own voice, and actions, but because of others and other processes that are being put in place.
Number 3 on our Farwell Show 5 this morning, U.S. President Donald Trump is reacting to Prime Minister Carney's decision to recognize Palestinian sovereignty. On social media, because where else, Trump suggested Ottawa's backing of Palestinian statehood would make it, quote, very hard for his administration to make a trade deal with Canada. And of course, the deadline for that deal is tomorrow. We're talking about that looming deadline, by the way, on our show this morning at 9:30. Number 4, the Ontario government says it will appeal a court decision that found a new law to remove 3 Toronto bike lanes unconstitutional. Superior Court Justice Paul Shabas ruled yesterday that bike lane removals would put people at an increased risk of harm and death, violating the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. A Transportation Ministry spokesperson says, though, the province plans to appeal the ruling as the government was elected with a, quote, clear mandate to remove bike lanes off major roads to improve traffic. And number 5 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, a local company has made a major contribution to the Humane Society's capital campaign. Elmira Pet Products has made a $100,000 donation to help build a new outreach center. CEO Brian Cook says giving back is something Elmira Pet Products believes in.
The gift to the donation center is a natural fit for us. It allows people to give back as we have given back to the community.
The new outreach center is expected to open next summer for the Humane Society, and it will include an Elmira Pet Products donation center. And that is your Farwell Show 5 for this Thursday morning. We'll take a break. When we come back, it was all but inevitable, wasn't it, that Prime Minister Carney would say what he said yesterday regarding Palestine and recognizing it as a state? I'm not necessarily convinced, though, that the Prime Minister said it in the best way. And I don't mean to be unkind, but I might just offer some constructive criticism with your morning wake-up call coming up. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. As I mentioned during the Farwell Show 5, it was virtually inevitable, wasn't it, that Canada would come forward and recognize a Palestinian state in the upcoming United Nations General Assembly. France, the UK, also moving in that direction. And I say it was inevitable. First of all, recognize that this is largely symbolic to recognize the state at the United Nations General Assembly. That said, it's significant enough for sure. But given the direction that some other Western powers were taking, and furthermore, I think cementing the inevitability of all of this is the images that we have been seeing and the stories that we have been hearing out of the Middle East, particularly in Gaza, where it seems as though there's been a really difficult time getting aid to the people who need it. Most concerning, the food. We are seeing far too much in the way of malnourished children in the midst of all of this conflict. And whatever narrative or story that you believe coming out of the Middle East, if this aid is being kept from the people who need it by Israel, or if Hamas is blocking access to it to make Israel look bad, I'm not sure that matters a whole heck of a lot. What does matter is that we are seeing people, particularly children, suffering unnecessarily. And I think it's just become too difficult to stomach, if you'll forgive that expression in this regard, here in this part of the world. And something had to be done, however symbolic it is, to make this declaration at the United Nations General Assembly. I would also like to think that given the ingenuity that clearly exists on Israel's side of this conflict, that we could find a way, they could find a way to ensure that the aid that is being delivered gets to the people to whom it is intended to help. It's very difficult to consume what we are seeing from that part of the world. And so, again, I would say that what we heard from Prime Minister Carney yesterday was virtually inevitable. What does it do to our prospects of getting a trade deal with the United States? I think Donald Trump can say whatever he wants on social media. I'm not sure it makes a huge difference at this part or at this time in the negotiations, but we shall see, of course. Let's go to the phones, hear from you on our morning wake-up call. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning. How you doing today?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Good man.
Yeah. Listen, if Carney is going to make a statement of any sort, if he's going to give a weather report, his speech writers have got to write it out, symbol or word by word, syllable by syllable. The man is an idiot. He cannot speak.
Okay.
I thought Trudeau was bad. And then look at Carney. He can't put two words together.
All right, Paul, fair. I would push back on the usage of idiot. However, it's your platform on the morning wake-up call. To your point, though, I have to be honest. I had a hard time getting past it myself. Now, giving a speech, delivering something that is written and prepared for you is one thing. And it's interesting. I was listening to, and I shared some clips with you on the show yesterday, an onstage conversation with former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, during which he said that when he was dealing with his political counterparts, inevitably, when he would be in the presence of United States politicians, be they governors, senators, you name it, they were always the best briefed, best prepared people in the room. Like there was a presence about them. And that, I think that says something about, political statehood, if you will, the manner in which you carry yourself in that role. And I'm honestly trying to remember the last great orator we had here in Canada. Delivering a speech is one thing. Answering questions and delivering coherent and cohesive thoughts off the cuff is another entirely. And frankly, in watching the breaking news of Canada's declaration of a Palestinian state yesterday from Prime Minister Carney, I did have a difficult time getting the message because truly, Prime Minister Carney had a whale of a time delivering it. There's no sugarcoating that. In fact, I was so put off by it that I put together a little audio for you this morning that I will say again, might not come across as the most kind, but I think it needs to be addressed here. And Prime Minister Carney's people had better get to work on this. I'll share it with you coming up. Stay with us on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Just being honest with you. When I was listening yesterday to Mark Carney, our Prime Minister, deliver the breaking news that Canada would recognize a Palestinian state, after several minutes of listening, I got tired because it was not a message that was delivered well. And it struck me that if you're our Prime Minister, you should be able to deliver messages better than Mr. Carney did yesterday. I played this clip for you this morning. I'll play it again now, and I'll be honest with you. I do this for virtually anybody that I'm playing a clip of because I want their message to come across as clearly as possible. So I edit out pauses, ahs to make the message as clear as possible. And so here's what you heard this morning on this show from Prime Minister Carney.
The United States is the essential partner in peace in the Middle East and in many parts of the world. And we've seen that demonstrated. The president does take a direct interest in resolving conflicts and has with respect to a broader set of developments in the Middle East. So again, the United States, this president will play and continue to play a central role. Others have responsibilities, Canada included, responsibilities on the humanitarian side, responsibilities with governance and other aspects that we're supporting. And we make our own independent foreign policy positions. And when we see opportunities, when we see necessity, which is what we see in this case, given the retreat of the prospect of a two-state solution because of the facts on the ground, as I explained. When we see that possibility and we see the combination of an ability to influence because of our own voice and actions, but because of others and other processes that are being put in place.
Gets a little word salady at the end, but whatever. Here's the point. That is about a 1 minute clip, 55 seconds to be exact. It could have been 10 seconds longer if I didn't remove this from the clip. I know, like, I'm not trying to be unkind, but can we count them together? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 18 ums or ahs in a 1 minute clip. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be unkind, but you got to do better than that, because the message started to get lost as I was listening to the Prime Minister yesterday. And so I spent time this morning not only cleaning up the message so you could hear it delivered more clearly, but also highlighting the ums and the ahs that really should not be there. It's a 1 minute answer. 18 times ummed and awed. No, thank you. Please, can we work on that? I think that would be helpful. I'm sorry to be constructively critical this morning. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. Tomorrow is deadline day, not to be confused with Major League Baseball's trade deadline, which is tonight, and we're all excited about the Blue Jays. I'm not sure how excited any of us is when it comes to our trade negotiations with the United States and the implications of the tariffs that have been imposed, could be imposed beyond those already in place, and what this relationship looks like moving forward. But tomorrow is the day by which we were supposed to arrive at some sort of deal. It's been made pretty clear. I don't think we have to read the tea leaves too carefully to understand that it's unlikely a deal will be reached by that deadline tomorrow, including comments from U.S. President Donald Trump on social media suggesting that our nation's declaration of Palestine as a sovereign state will make it even more difficult to arrive at a deal. I don't think we were getting to one anyway, but these are difficult times for us just as Canadians and consumers. How do you think the business community is feeling right about now? Dan Kelly is the president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business and joins us for a conversation. Dan, good morning.
Good morning.
What's your level of concern this morning, 24 hours or so ahead of this deadline?
Oh, it's pretty high. This is very, very serious. And even if there is no decision made, if this just gets kicked forward, that too has significant consequences for small business owners, given it is the uncertainty that has been choking the Canadian business community for many, many months.
What makes this serious right now, Dan? What's the situation for these small business owners?
Yeah, look, our economic data shows that small firms are not knocking the lights out. This has been a tough 5 years for many small companies, as there's not been really a normal month of sales for many, since the pandemic began. Many are carrying far more debt than they did before, simply because during the 2 years of on and off lockdowns, that just businesses had to borrow really to just get through it. And then when we add to that the uncertainty that's happened since, especially this uncertainty over trade, that's just adding a massive amount of stress to the business community that's already underwater. So we have the tariffs themselves have not been widely applied. There is, of course, U.S. tariffs on a variety of Canadian goods, but even now, about 2/3 to 3/4 of Canadian exports do still go to the U.S. tariff-free as a result of the deal that we have, the exemption that we have on CUSMA-compliant goods, those that fall under our trade agreement. But coming back into Canada, many small businesses import from the United States, and they have faced retaliatory tariffs, Canada's retaliatory tariffs on U.S. products, and that too is affecting many small businesses and their consumers. So we're getting some products in both directions tariffed, but even those that are not currently subject to the tariffs are worried that could change at any hour.
What would a successful deal look like to you, a good outcome in these negotiations?
What's most critical to small business is that we maintain the CUSMA exemption, that CUSMA or USMCA exemption for goods that are made primarily in Mexico, Canada, or the United States. If we protect that will mean that most manufactured goods will be able to go into the United States tariff-free, and of course back into Canada, one assumes tariff-free, and that would be welcome news to Canadian small businesses that are very, very worried about that. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to successfully avoid some of the sectoral tariffs, as it seems like they're a part of every trade agreement the president has signed with other countries so far. And that means that commodities like copper, products like aluminum and steel, and auto parts, cars and auto parts, those one expects will still be subject to some degree of tariff, even post an agreement. And that, of course, has significant consequences on the Canadian economy, but not quite as grave if this was widely applied to every single product.
Much has been made about the elbows up approach to this deal that needs to be renegotiated, and Canada could or should match the U.S. tariff for tariff. What impact would retaliatory tariffs have on our small business community?
Well, they're already having a pretty significant hold, and we've only tariffed a few goods that are coming into Canada right now. But when I look at the data that we've collected, about 16% of my members, small business owners, members of CFIB, they export to the United States. But 50% of them import from the United States. So our retaliatory tariffs actually have a harder hit to the Canadian economy, to small business owners, and to consumers than the U.S. tariffs themselves. The U.S. tariffs are terrible and very serious for many sectors of the economy, but the tariffs that we impose are very, very tough for the country to manage. Despite that, small businesses have been supportive to date of some degree of retaliatory tariffing of U.S. goods in order to try to get a deal. The question that we have to ask ourselves as Canadians is, if that doesn't work, if the U.S. does go ahead with tariffs anyway, do we still want to impose tariffs on U.S. products? So, let's say the U.S. tariffs don't go away. Do we want to continue to charge, should the government charge all of us even more on a wider range of U.S. imports, especially given that they are, in some areas almost unavoidable because the U.S. Manufacturers are dominating many product spaces.
I feel, Dan, like you are truly facing the double-edged sword here. On the one hand, there's the prospect of a bad deal for small business. On the other hand, there's the uncertainty that comes with kicking this deadline further down the road.
No, you're absolutely right. The Prime Minister, Mark Carney, is correct to say that no deal is better than a bad deal. But the second worst deal than a bad deal is no deal at all. Like, that's really, really harmful because it is the uncertainty that is the primary impact of tariffs right now, because we're just not sure what's going to happen. So, I was reading through emails from small business owners to my desk. One that stood out, certainly something I've heard from many others, is a small manufacturer saying he's carried, since the tariff threat, his consumers' demand has dropped significantly, but he's kept his staff on simply because he's hoping that we'll be able to get this deal done and get this behind us and carry on. But the longer this goes, his ability to keep those staff on, it becomes more and more limited. And he said, look, if a deal isn't reached by Friday, he is going to have to start laying off staff. He has no choice. He has no income to continue to support them. So this is the kind of thing that we're likely to see happen if a deal isn't reached, is that businesses basically say, I can't wait anymore. I have to start making some decisions. Right now, the business community has been kind of frozen for many months, but being frozen, especially if the income isn't coming in, that forces you to make some pretty tough choices, and you can't do it forever. You can't freeze forever.
Dan, really appreciate you making time for the show this morning. Thanks for being here.
Anytime at all.
Dan Kelly is the president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business and shares with us the small business perspective in all of this, which is grim to say the least. And I don't think Dan's point should be lost on the last 5 years for these smaller independent businesses and how there hasn't been a typical month in the midst of those 60 over the past 5 years. What would your approach be as this deadline to reach a trade deal looms? Ron was quick off the hop with an email just as we were starting the show this morning to Mike at 570news.com. And he says, we need to hurt the U.S. in all of this. If I was the prime minister, I would cause a lot of pain to the U.S. I'd cut off power. I'd cut off oil. I'd cut off the natural gas that we sell to the U.S. And I would stop all metals from leaving this country. That would be Ron's approach. You just heard from Dan Kelly with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. What about you? If you were at that negotiating table, what would your approach be? Let me know. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
This is the kind of thing that we're likely to see happen if a deal isn't reached, is that businesses basically say, I can't wait anymore. I have to start making some decisions. Right now, the business community has been kind of frozen for many months, but being frozen, especially if the income isn't coming in, that forces you to make some pretty tough choices, and you can't do it forever. You can't freeze forever.
Dan Kelly is the president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, joins us this morning to talk about the impact that this tariff war is having on small independent businesses in this country, which I'll remind you, and this is why we focus on them, small independent businesses, as often as we do, because they are the backbone of this country. They are the backbone of employment. They are the backbone of our communities. They do so many things to lift up and support the neighborhoods in which they operate. So when they're struggling, we're all struggling. It might mean that there's not a place of employment for your kid this summer. It might mean that the sports team that your child plays for doesn't get the usual sponsorship. It might mean that these business owners are currently in the position of making that big decision as to whether or not they even keep the lights on anymore. These are the real dinner table issues in this tariff war. It's one thing to talk about the United States versus Canada or Canada versus the United States, elbows up, elbows down. Who knows where our elbows are? Tariffs on steel, tariffs on aluminum, tariffs on this, tariffs on that, 50%, 35%, 15%. It's all just noise to these people kind of in the trenches, if you will, who are living and breathing the impact every day because we change our habits when it comes to spending, because they may be sourcing goods for their local independent business from the United States or exporting to the United States. And this has a real impact on their bottom lines. I don't think we are going to be arriving at any kind of resolution before the deadline tomorrow. This will, I believe, get pushed further down the road. How far down that road? I haven't the foggiest, but you know from that conversation we just had with Dan Kelly from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business that these small businesses are in a holding pattern that is not a comfortable one, to say the very least. And as deals continue to get made around the world, I'll just reference Ron's email again, where among the other things he says we should use as a pain point for the United States is take away the oil, take away the gas, etc. The deal that the United States just reached with South Korea includes liquefied natural gas, which South Korea had wanted from us many years ago, and, well, that didn't quite work out. But if that were to be a pain point, we may have lost that bit of leverage. It's getting more and more difficult to get a deal that is good for us as Canadians as other nations make their own deals with the United States. It's quite an interesting time. We're going to take a break. When we come back, news yesterday that Wilmot Township had hired a new CAO, I think takes on a broader story than just the good person they got to be their chief administrative officer. I'll explain coming up, but I think there are layers to this story that we should be aware of. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Ian, who is Farwell's Force member 101, sends an email to Mike at 570news.com. I agree with Ron about how we should approach the United States in this trade war. We're dealing with an idiot. Mr. Trump has said we don't need anything from Canada. Well, for many years, we've been one of their biggest trading partners. If that's the way they feel, we shouldn't send them anything. Sure, we will suffer, but at least we won't have to listen to Trump until the United States is willing to come to their senses. Maybe a bit extreme, but if it's possible, we should consider. That from Ian, member number 101 on Farwell's Force. We are a force for good, for change, and to be reckoned with here on the show, after all. I just wanted to peel back one of the layers, or maybe more, of the onion when it comes to Wilmot Township's announcement this week that they had hired as their CAO, the Chief Administrative Officer, the top bureaucrat at any municipality. Jeff Wilmer is their new CAO after they've gone through a period of some turbulence in that area, the resignation of their former CAO, then a couple of interims, and now along comes Jeff Wilmer, who has got tremendous experience. I want to be clear about that. I think this is a great hire for the township of Wilmot. Jeff Wilmer has a terrific track record from his time doing the same job with the city of Kitchener before he retired, and then did some great work with a Better Tent City here in our region, not to mention some consulting with the city of Cambridge. But I'm just thinking about the role of CAO and how important it is to the functioning and operation of a municipality, and how Wilmot, again, great hire, but bringing somebody out of retirement to do the job. And it makes me wonder if we are valuing experience enough within our municipalities, maybe within our workplaces generally, this might apply, giving people the opportunity to grow and learn within an organization, if people are even taking advantage of those opportunities. We've talked on this show not too long ago about how young people are less inclined than ever to get involved in the civil service, to serve the public through a role with any level of government. And from where I'm sitting, I would encourage my kid, like we encourage so many, get into the skilled trades, plenty of work, this and that. It's good work. It's well-paid work. You got good benefits if you're working within any level of government, and yet younger people are more inclined than ever to stay away from those jobs, which means the future CAOs are not being developed such that we're currently calling them out of retirement. As good as the hire is for Wilmot Township, at a time where I think Wilmot really will benefit from the stewardship of somebody like Jeff Wilmer, I'm just wondering where our next cohort of CAOs are going to come from. Or will we be always calling on these people of deep experience out of retirement? I think we might have to figure that out, not just in municipalities, but maybe in workplaces generally. Experience matters, and helping develop the next cohort of leaders matters as well. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. I might argue that the biggest issue in our region today is speed cameras. How they operate, when they operate, the times of day, days of week, etc. But if that's the biggest, followed very closely behind, maybe it's a 1 and 1A sort of thing. Following very closely behind would be Phase 2 of light rail transit. It's been the subject of considerable discussion lately as we all anxiously await a report to Regional Council about Phase 2 of light rail, which is due sometime around mid-September, if memory serves. Tony Schmidt is the chair of the Preston Town Centre BIA and joins us for a conversation. Tony, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you very much for making the time. I know it's a summertime and maybe people try to relax more, but you're making time for our show, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, this is something really important to Cambridge and I think our region as a whole, so this is why we have to make time to get this moving forward.
Well, I would certainly concur with that, not only to the city of Cambridge, but to the region as a whole. To get this project completed, Phase 2 would take light rail from Fairview Mall in Kitchener into the south end of Cambridge. Why is this so important, do you believe, to the city of Cambridge, Tony?
Well, the irony listening here just today, you said one of the comments was that you're located at the center of the region. And if the LRT moves forward, which I do believe it will be coming right past your broadcast center and coming down into a lot of population, a lot of people that want to move freely amongst the region. And I think the economic spinoff has already been proven in Kitchener-Waterloo, and I think there's plenty of opportunity just sitting there waiting in Cambridge.
You, as the chair of the Preston Town Centre BIA, it strikes me that you're talking about promoting this because I'm not sure it benefits Preston as much as it might Hespeler and Galt.
Well, Hespeler Road will see significant opportunity right down through into Galt. But there is a stop proposed at the corner of Eagle and King, just in the one corner there. So that certainly gives plenty of opportunity for even more walking community, intensification for population in the Preston area. Hespeler, unfortunately, because of the path of the way things go, Hespeler doesn't receive a stop. I believe there's 5 stops going through the Cambridge area to get to Galt.
What about the cost, Tony, which is the one of the big things that we often talk about? A $4.6 billion project is certainly on the expensive side, gives people some sticker shock. How do you propose we absorb something like that?
Absolutely. It's a big ticket item. And I certainly note as we look at the cost of rec centers and any other big projects that we do, time certainly does not make things cheaper. This is a time where we have an opportunity with this is virtually a shovel-ready project, and it has to be a good news win for the provincial and federal government to bring funding. They want to be part of good news. The tax money that we have already paid into the coffers of the province and the region, the province and the federal government. This is our opportunity to have those funds spent here instead of another forward-thinking community making application and our tax dollars going somewhere else.
You mentioned earlier that the business case for the success of LRT seems to have already been made in Kitchener and Waterloo. What have you seen here, where I'm sitting and talking to you today, that you think Cambridge would see similar benefit?
Well, absolutely. I think our next generation, like I notice many kids don't even get their driver's licenses, and they're looking for opportunities to be able to transition through the region. So somebody could get an apartment down in Galt or buy a condominium in Galt and Preston and be able to, move amongst the region. So you're going to see some of these underutilized properties. You look along Hespeler Road, you look at some areas in Preston right now where as soon as those tracks are confirmed that those are going to go in, you will see the developers, you will see the attention of investors come in to build the housing that we need. It's not necessarily the picket fence 2-story houses that, we grew up aspiring for. people's needs of housing have changed. They're quite happy to start in a 500, 600, 800 square foot condominium and work their way up and build equity as they go.
I was just down to your part of Cambridge about a week or so ago, enjoying a nice dinner at a restaurant we enjoy there. And, you look around and it's a very familiar, let's say, Preston, from the one I've known for many, many years, Tony. And some might argue, hey, it's fine, if not great, just the way that it is. What if phase 2 doesn't happen? What would you see the impact being?
Well, that's a lens that I can't say that I've actually looked through. I just don't see things staying the way they are. I think this is such an important piece of infrastructure that Cambridge, Preston needs. The truth is Preston right now needs a significant infill development. If you look at Galt, they've had the Gaslight, the American Standard has happened in Hespeler. We've got some properties in Preston that I believe that this would be the catalyst for people to invest to build those units that we so much need, which then will feed the businesses of Preston with walking, pedestrian-friendly economy.
Tony, really appreciate you stepping forward on the issue and making time for our show today. Thank you very much for being here.
And I want to thank you for bringing this forward and keeping it in front of everybody's mind. Thank you so much.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Tony Schmidt is the chair of the Preston Town Centre BIA, and he says light rail transit phase 2 is the bold investment that Cambridge needs for its future. And if you'll forgive me, please, I'm so sorry, but when I think of Cambridge and its 3 still rather distinct areas of Preston, Galt, and Hespeler, I always think, if it's Hespeler Road, it must be Hespeler, right? And I know part of it, but once you get to Hespeler and Pine Bush, you're into the Preston area again. I always think of, and so that's why I wondered what's the benefit for Preston, because when I think Preston, I think King and Eagle, King and Fountain, Riverside Park, all of that. Preston Springs, where it used to be the hotel, that to me has always been Preston. If you go up Eagle to where it hits and turns to Pine Bush and becomes a Hespeler and Pine Bush area, I think of that as being Hespeler all of a sudden, because Hespeler Road, right? But of course, a good chunk of Hespeler Road as it runs into Galt, down to the Delta, et cetera, is still in the quote-unquote Preston part of Cambridge. I always overlook that just because of the name of Hespeler Road, and I apologize for that. I still love you, Cambridge. I just have a difficult time figuring out in what part of Cambridge I am in when I'm there, because I grew up in a world, remember, since Cambridge amalgamated back in the early 1970s, it was always just Cambridge to me. Folks who have lived there much longer still identify with their individual neighborhoods of Preston, Galt, and Hespeler. That said, and hopefully you'll accept my apology on that, what do you make of Tony's arguments in favor of light rail phase 2? Particularly, I'm interested around his idea of, listen, we know that upper levels of government are going to need to step forward. There is not a snowball's chance in Hades, I don't believe, that we will fund this entirely on the backs of local taxpayers. In fact, dare I say that none of it should come from local taxpayers. It should all come from provincial and federal tax money, which I know as locals we pay into, but I don't think this should be a tax burden placed on any part of the property tax base here in the region, like phase 1, which was 1/3 region, 1/3 provincial, 1/3 federal. This phase 2, and it's $4.6 billion should be entirely funded provincially and or federally from where I'm sitting. But Tony makes the point, if we don't get our act together and get our applications in for this kind of funding, then some other community is going to take advantage of those funding opportunities from upper levels of government, and they will progress as we get left behind. Does that argument resonate with you? Do we need phase 2 of light rail into Cambridge? Let me know your thoughts on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
This is a time where we have an opportunity with this is virtually a shovel-ready project, and it has to be a good news win for the provincial and federal government to bring funding. The tax money that we have already paid into the coffers of the province and the federal government, this is our opportunity to have those funds spent here instead of another forward-thinking community making application and our tax dollars going somewhere else.
Brilliant. That's the nut right there. And our excellent guy on the other side of the glass, Devin Robertson, nailed it. From the conversation we just had with Tony Schmidt, chair of the Preston Town Centre BIA, who says, we got to get phase 2, $4.5 billion price tag be damned, into Cambridge. 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. How important is this project for you? Can you get past the sticker shock of that $4.5 billion? Don't worry, upper levels of government will pay for it. And the important thing here is, along with what you just heard from Tony, the development that will come along with the laying down of those tracks. Go to the phones. Kyle, good morning.
Nailed it. Devin did a good job on that. They should have brought this. I don't know why they didn't bring this as just one big stage one.
Yeah, I wish you're right.
Cambridge is part of the Waterloo region. They just should have just started in Cambridge and ended in Waterloo, and it would have been done and over with right now. But this is the problem: is they always plan for the present and they never plan for the future. Now look at us. We're the fastest growing region in Waterloo. Now we're going to be behind on stage 2 because it's going to take us probably 20 years to get done. And it's going to cost us, I don't believe the number. I think the number is a lot bigger than what he's telling me, because that's always what it is. They always say that they budget for this, but it's always 10 times the cost of what it's going to cost us anyway. So, yeah, they should have done this a long time ago, Mike. And, I feel for those people in Cambridge, because now they're going to be stuck with trying to figure out what they're going to do. So if they're going to bring in rapid bus transit or LRT, doesn't matter. I feel bad for people of Cambridge. Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, Kyle, appreciate it. I do feel somewhat badly myself for the folks in Cambridge who, I agree with Kyle, I think should have had this from the get-go. We should have just built the whole ding-dang system at once, but hindsight's 2020. Just a point that I think is important to make around Kyle's assertion that it will eventually cost more because budgets always get blown through. Just so you're aware, and I believe, I'm going off the top of my head here, so forgive me, but I want to say 2037, somewhere in the late 2030s, let's call it 2040, is when this is projected to be done if we keep moving forward at a pace here. So, mid 2030s, let's say, over a decade away, in other words. But the budget and the numbers that we're hearing now of the $4.5 to $4.6 billion are future-proofed, if you will. It takes into account future costs, inflation, et cetera, et cetera. And there would be a contingency built into that budget, as there is for all of these projects. I'm not saying it won't go over. I am saying that they're talking about $4.5-ish billion in $2037 when this project is, when the work is actually being done. So it's not as if we don't start today, it's just going to be more expensive tomorrow. Those forecasts have already been built into this budget. So I think that's important to remember. Something else I just want to stress here, and I'm not trying to be a dark cloud on the project. I want Cambridge to have this. I want our region to have this. But I also want us to be careful when we talk about having it paid for by upper levels of government, right? So we here in the region, we won't have to pay for this ourselves. The province and the feds are going to pay for it. Just pump your brakes on that language for a minute here, okay? Because when the province and the feds pay for it, we still pay for it, right? It is our tax money. It's just distributed further throughout the entire province, throughout the entire country. I know you know how this works, but I think it's important that we make that clear when we talk about the funding for this, whether it's coming from the municipal government, the provincial government, or the federal government. It's all coming from us in one way or another. It's just coming out of a different pocket. So I want us to be clear on that. And the final point I'll make on this is we have seen the development that's occurred around the tracks. It's been an unqualified success in Kitchener and Waterloo. Whether you like the ridership numbers or not, the development that's happened, the billions of dollars is worth it all on its own. You imagine Hespeler Road? I think Hespeler Road, where these tracks will go down, Phase 2 in Cambridge, has got the potential. It'll make the corridor in Kitchener and Waterloo look like, I don't know, the smallest little township in all of Ontario. Like, we'll be tiny township. It's going to be so spectacular on Hespeler Road, in my opinion. What's possible there when the tracks are there? You won't recognize Hespeler Road. It'll be a very good thing, too. My humble opinion, or not so humble. The Mike Farwell Show continues. Janice, we'll get to your call right after this. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Who wants a $4.5 billion train to Cambridge? I think it will pay dividends down the road, but let's go back to the phones. Janice has been waiting. Good morning, Janice.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Very good.
Good.
As somebody who doesn't live in Hespeler anymore, but grew up there, first of all, I have to agree with the previous caller about this should have been done with the light rail transit in KW.
Yep.
It should have been included. But Hespeler always seems to be get screwed over by the because my understanding is that there won't be any light rail stops.
That's right.
In Hespeler?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, oh my God, how are the people of Hespeler going to be able to, and they're going to be paying for this? How are they going to be able to utilize?
I guess they'll have to take the bus over to Preston.
Yeah, right? That's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, I know you can't answer the question. It's just my statement. That's all.
Thanks for me. No, thanks, Janice. I appreciate it. I mean, I get it. And look, we could make the same argument in a city as spread out as Kitchener, for example. How are the folks in Activa benefiting from the train that runs right through the core of Kitchener, right? Hespeler argue as the, outer limit suburb, if you will, in Cambridge. But Janice raises an excellent point. At least in Hespeler, you still got Eddie's, right? You still got Forefathers celebrating their 10th anniversary, the big party coming up in a little bit. I mean, you got Hespeler Village. Great little spot. But I hear you. And it's an excellent point raised. All of that said, I'm still hoping that we get this done. Some way, by hook or by crook, we'll find $4.5 billion. Start shaking those couch cushions, Cambridge. Here we come. Going to get you an update from the 570 News Center. And then Gary Chalk. Or is it Gary Chalk? Have you seen the picture on our Facebook page this morning? I'll encourage you to check that out as we get this update from the 570 News Center. And then that's what Gary Chalk looks like? Facebook.com/The Mike Farwell Show. Living Retired with Gary is coming up on 570 News Radio.
Hookah chaka, hookah, hookah, hookah chaka, hookah, hookah, hookah chaka, hookah, hookah, hookah chaka, hookah, hookah. I can't stop this feeling deep inside of me. Girl, you just don't realize what you do to me. When you hold me in your arms so tight, you let me know everything's alright. I'm hooked on a feeling.
Thursday mornings, 10:30. That feeling is lighter. We get a little laughter in our day thanks to our good friend Gary Chalk, who writes a humor column called Living Retired. You can find it online at livingretired.press. And while you're there, you sign up for the weekly newsletter like I did, and the column gets delivered directly to your inbox, which is fantastic because what you need amongst all of the memos from the boss is a little laugh in your day. And Gary brings that column to life on our show each and every Thursday morning at this time. Mr. Chalk, good morning.
Good morning, Mike with a mic. And you're surviving the hot spell, not the hot spell, the heat, not the heat wave, the weather event. I got to keep up. Like, what is with that, Mike?
Gary, don't get me started down this road because I'll tell you, I'll take up all your time today. You want to make people laugh, I'll just get cranky about,
Well,
but
tell
anyway.
you, when I grew up, they said it's going to snow, or it's going to rain, or it's going to be hot. Now it's always a weather event.
Exactly. We got names for these things, heat domes, snowmageddon. It's ridiculous. Listen, young man, I got to ask you something because I was just minding my own business, kind of vegging out on the couch one afternoon recently, and I came across an old episode of MacGyver.
Oh, yeah.
I loved that show when I was younger, and it was a little bit nostalgic. And in this particular episode, it dealt with a young hockey player, so they had me hooked. It's nostalgic. It's about hockey. And how, imagine my surprise, Gary, when at the end of the show and the credits were rolling, and I've posted this picture on our Facebook page, so please check it out, facebook.com/The Mike Farwell Show. The picture is of Richard Dean Anderson, the actor who played MacGyver. It looks as handsome as ever, but the end credits to that show that I watched said, Gary Chalk as Tony Ellis. Gary, I thought you were just a humor columnist.
Well, I guess you spilled the beans.
I guess I did.
Well, I was actually in 3 episodes of MacGyver. Your listeners may remember I was Tony Ellis. I was Detective Sweeney, and on one of the shows I was Sergeant Harold Gray. But I was a good-looking guy. I had my hair all Hollywood coiffed, and it's back in the days when I was acting. I was also in Outer Limits. You ever see Outer Limits, Detective Barnett? That was me.
Okay.
Yeah, and also you probably saw National Lampoon's Thanksgiving Family Reunion. I was Fred Hodges. And another movie not so long ago, Fargo. Remember that back in 2015?
I loved that movie.
Well, if you go and look at it again, you'll see me. I was the bartender. It was one of the shows where I was actually cast in a role that I understood. but I'm telling you, overall, 50 television shows. I included. Also, I was in the 68 episodes of Cold Squad, Inspector Polachuk. That's just my telephone. I don't like to brag, but I also have a movie career. Did you ever see the movie Small Sacrifices? Did you see that?
I did not see that one.
Well, you should look it up. It's a made-for-television series, and I don't like to brag, but Farrah Fawcett and Ryan O'Neal played alongside me. I didn't play alongside them. Farrah and Ryan played alongside me. I was Farrah's ex-husband, and the series got quite a lot of. It got some Emmy Award nominations, and of course, my friend Farrah, she got the Outstanding Lead Actress. And I got a Peabody. That was for Farrah's thing. And if my memory serves me right, Mike, I think, Jan says my memory doesn't, I think Farrah and I were sort of linked together. We were sort of an item away from the set as well. But you may want to check that out.
I will definitely look back. I just can't believe that after all this time, only now is this being revealed. Like, I had to watch an old episode of MacGyver to uncover this illustrious acting Hollywood past of yours.
Well, Mike, if you would have Googled Gary Chalk, that's how you would have discovered there's more, believe it or not, than one Gary Chalk. You ever Googled yourself?
If I'm honest, I haven't done it in a long time, but yes, there was a time that I would do that. I just wanted to make sure the stuff that was out there was still, in keeping with my reputation.
So what'd you find out? Any other Mike Farwells?
Yes. So I am the owner of a very fine food and wine restaurant in Pasadena, California called Noir Food.
Ooh, that sounds upscale.
I think it does. Way more upscale than me, speaking of my reputation, right? I could be an assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania.
Really?
Yes. But my favorite one, Gary, I think you should just refer to me as doctor from now on, a specialist of internal medicine in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Holy, you've hit the big time.
I think I have. I mean, not quite as big as doing a movie with Farrah Fawcett, but, internal medicine, I'll figure out what's wrong with your guts or something.
Oh, my God. Well, I'm impressed. I've always been fascinated with sort of people with the same name as me. And, yeah, I know it can be a little vain if you try to Google yourself. But years ago, when I was a kid, my parents would take my sister, Diane, and I, and we'd go on vacations, road trips. And my parents didn't have a lot of money, but they insisted we'd always have a family vacation. And we stayed in what I would describe as inexpensive motels. So they were always outside of the major city we were going, or they were several miles away from the tourist attraction. Like when we went to Expo, we stayed in Kingston. We wanted something cheaper. But I remember those out-of-the-way motels. There were two things. For whatever reason, Mike, these motels back in those days, they always had knotty pine decor.
Absolutely, yes, I know them well. Absolutely.
Yeah. And also they had a bed that you could insert a quarter, and it shook for 15 minutes. It was a vibrating bed or something, so I'd get up in the middle of the night, and I'd stick a quarter in my parents' bed and watch them sort of wake up with the shakes. So the other thing that I would do, as I say, I was always interested, I would try to find the phone book, and those motel rooms had a Bible and a phone book back in those days, and I would look up Gary Chalk, and I always wanted to make sure it was spelled my way, Gary, one R, and Chalk with no U. One time we were in Ocean City, Maryland, and I discovered there was a Gary Chalk. I looked up the phone number, and I picked up the phone in the room, and I called. And the phone rang, and the guy at the other end, he answered. He said, "Hello." And I said, and I was a kid, I said, "May I please speak with Gary Chalk?" And the man said, "This is Gary Chalk speaking." So I said, "Hi, Gary Chalk. This is Gary Chalk." And you know what happened?
What happened?
That was the end of the conversation. He hung up.
Oh, Gary Chalk, the real Gary Chalk, the humor columnist, not the actor, but it's kind of fun to Google yourself. And I know that you, like me, when you heard Gary make reference to that Naughty Pine furniture in those roadside motels, you remember the Naughty Pine restaurant in Cambridge, too. That's not the Naughty Pine we were talking about. We'll continue with the real Gary Chalk, living retired this morning. And now that we've passed the halfway point of the year, who is it that's in the running for living retired 2025 Newsmaker of the Year? We continue living retired on the Mike Farwell Show this morning, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. And on Thursday mornings at this time, it's less about the hard questions and more about the fun with Gary Chalk, who writes the humor column Living Retired. You can find it online, livingretired.press. Make sure to sign up for the weekly newsletter so that column can be delivered directly to your inbox each and every week. And I know something, Gary, that you do each and every year is compile a list of the living retired newsmakers of the year. We're a little over halfway through 2025. Any early contenders for living retired newsmaker of the year?
Well, the interns here at the World Headquarters, Living Retired, they've been working hard. We do have 3 so far who are in contention, but, we're only halfway through the years, you say. But before I tell you those names, Mike, just so you know the type of competition that those people will face. The finalists last year, I don't know whether you remember. Remember Refried Burrito Man?
I do. Him? Oh, I remember him.
Yeah, he was the guy who boarded the plane in Phoenix, and just about as the plane is about to take off, Refried Bean Burrito Man, he made such a stink. Well, it eventually drifted to the cockpit, and the pilots decided to abort their takeoff. They figured there wasn't too much wind outside, but if you sort of know what I mean, it was the wind that was inside the cabin that was the issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so fortunately, the frequent flatulent flyers, it didn't become a thing. The story eventually blew over, but that was Refried Bean Burrito Man. And the second one in our running in the contest last year was, you got to remember this guy, Banana Man. Right?
Yes, but the art piece, the piece
Yep, this is the guy who has so much money. And true story, these are true. He was in the art exhibit walking through in Miami, and something spoke to him, which art does. And what spoke to Banana Nana Man was a piece of art. It was a banana duct taped to a piece of drywall. So this guy had so much money, he peeled out $6 million, and he took it home. And instead of hanging the banana on his family room wall, which obviously this guy wasn't all stupid, it would attract a gazillion fruit flies, he ate the banana. So much for the $6 million piece of art. Oh, my gosh. And then the third one in the running last year was the Ding-a-Ling Man. Do you remember that one? He was a little more obscure.
Yeah, I don't remember Ding-a-Ling Man.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, he was a Canadian, training at least in Ottawa. He's one of those extreme sporting event competitors. And he was in the boxing ring training. Well, one thing led to another, and poor Ding-a-Ling Man received a low blow to his groin. And as it happens, the story I came across, Ding-a-Ling Man did not seek immediate medical assistance.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, and so he let a month pass. This poor guy, he's now in the ring against another opponent, and this guy plants his knee, you guessed it, into the groin of Ding-a-Ling Man. Now, finally, Ding-a-Ling Man went to the hospital for surgery, and they said that they're glad because he just about wasn't there in time. So that's the competition that we're facing. So here we are. We've got now 3 candidates for the 2025 Living Retired Newsmaker of the Year. First one, Alex the Great. You heard about this one?
I'm not sure.
Well, the claim to fame for Alex the Great is throwing out the ceremonial first pitch at a minor league baseball team in Reno, Nevada. They're called the Reno Aces. They're a AAA farm affiliate of the Diamondbacks in Arizona. Here's the thing. Alex the Great throwing out the first pitch. It's not a human. Instead, Alex the Great is a rabbit. And this rabbit was rescued from a California meat farm. Now, this guy's 30 pounds, and he's now so popular that he has 54,000 Instagram followers. So that's Alex the Great, the first potential newsmaker of the year. And what gets me, we have all these things that are so serious about our economy and the tariffs, and there's 54,000 people, they're not aware of that. They're just following Alex the Great on Instagram.
Yeah, but Gary, rabbits don't have arms. How did he throw out the pitch?
That was the whole thing.
Okay. I'm trying to keep up. Wow.
Well,
he is great.
All I can say is probably when he threw the first pitch, the rabbit did, the fur flew.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
All right.
So here's number 2.
Yeah.
Number 2, Cucumber Man. I wrote about him in my Living Retired column this week that went out Monday. And Cucumber Man is a biochemist from Germany, and he discovered he was vacationing in Turkey, and he came across exploding cucumbers. Now, picture in your mind, here's Cucumber Man, dressed in lederhosen, shopping at an outdoor farmer's market. He's walking amongst the stalls and stopping to chat with various vendors about their fresh eggplant and leeks and artichokes and things in Turkey, when suddenly, boom! Very innocently, he placed a cucumber in his straw basket, and all HE double hockey sticks broke out, and market goers, they hit the deck. So that's number 2.
Okay, Cucumber Man, yep.
Yeah. Now keep in mind that Cucumber Man, the news, as well as I heard it, he came to Canada. I can imagine having cucumbers in the hands of home chefs with a Ronco Vegematic, but just imagine if some wacko dictator gets his hands on exploding cucumbers, a food fight may break out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the riot police would be deployed. They'd have rubber bullets, water cannons, and tear gas to control all the unruly protesters who, instead of tossing Molotov cocktails, are hurting exploding cucumbers. Boom!
That's got a B-movie script waiting to be written, Gary.
I wonder if they'll call on me to act in it.
I hope they do.
Oh, okay. I'm just telling you. And if you do the math, I found out that one cucumber has about 100 seeds, and a bushel of cucumbers contains 100 cucumbers. So every time one of those cucumbers explode, that's 10,000 seeds sprouting into action. Boom!
I can see it now. It is a mess. It is a mess.
Okay, here's the third nominee, and we're still looking for more. So if any of your listeners want to get in touch with me, please do. We're looking for more contenders.
Okay, we got like 60 seconds to get this third contender.
Okay, Stupid Robber.
Yep.
This is a guy down in Tennessee, in Memphis. He's wanted on a warrant, and the marshals got a break. They got a tip that he was in a house. They arrived at the residence. When they entered, he fell into their lap, so to speak. He was hiding in the attic and fell right through when they walked in.
Stupid Robber, Alex the Great, and Cucumber Man in contention for 2025 Living Retired Newsmaker of the Year.
You've got it, Chef Mike, or Dr. Mike, or Professor Mike, whatever I call you now.
Doctor will be just fine, thank you. Gary, enjoy the rest of your day.
Same to you and the listeners. Bye now.
Gary Chalk, author of the humor column Living Retired and sometimes actor in previous episodes of MacGyver, apparently. Listen for Gary every Thursday morning at this time on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. You remember how about 6 months or so ago we were talking about all the vehicles being stolen in Canada and how lucrative the industry of car thefts was? Well, how the tides have turned in that department. Car thefts decreasing. What might be behind that and what might we still have to be concerned about? We'll talk about it coming up on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Well, it wasn't too long ago that we were talking about a virtual epidemic of auto thefts in this country. They were quickly taken from driveways around the GTA, and before you knew it, they were in a shipping container at the Port of Montreal. Poof, gone to far corners of the world, and in many cases being used to fund organized crime initiatives. But those tides seem to have turned, according to a new report that shows a declining number of auto thefts in this country. Brian Gast is the Vice President of Investigative Services with Equity Association and joins us for a chat. Brian, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for making the time. What are we seeing in terms of the numbers when we compare car thefts, in the last 6 months based on the 6 months prior?
Yeah, and I say this with caution. I don't want to give the indication that we've beat this and we can move on. I think we need to stay the course and continue with doing what we're doing and more. But it is great to see a decline. Nationally, 19%, Ontario 25.9%, so nearly 26%, and Quebec 22%. Across the country, we've seen a decline. So it's a good indication that what's been done so far is having an effect.
I'm glad you started that answer the way that you did. While optimistic, it's not as though we can, stop our efforts to combat what is certainly not a victimless crime. And I think that's important to remember in all of this.
Absolutely. This is not a victimless crime. It's not just a property crime. Criminal networks, organized crime groups are using the vehicle as a commodity, and they're profiting from it. And it's going into organized crime, into their organizations.
What do you think has led to this decline in numbers, Brian?
It's a collaborative approach. Everything from media making the problem known, letting consumers know how to protect themselves. Really started with the Ontario government and the significant resources standing up the provincial auto theft team led by the OPP and participating police services. And then you have the dedicated prosecutors going after the organized crime groups. And I think that's significant. It's one thing to go after the common thief that stole the vehicle, but it's a completely other thing to go to the higher levels of these organized crime groups and really cause some disruption to the organized crime groups. And then the collaboration and cooperation between our organization, law enforcement, CBSA, the work between Ontario and Quebec has been significant, especially at the Port of Montreal.
How does that collaboration work? Like when this problem was at its peak and a vehicle was stolen in the GTA, let's say, what does that collaborative process look like in terms of law enforcement?
And law enforcement have long recognized that what happens in one jurisdiction is happening in another. So it's really combining efforts through intelligence, through enforcement. There's points in time where you had multiple police services at the Port of Montreal, many of them from Ontario, assisting the Sûreté and Montreal Police, working on projects collaboratively, joint forces operations, and they've been significant. Project Vector would be a good example of that. Multiple police services, including our expert vehicle examiners, just going after working collaboratively, knowing that what you do in one jurisdiction is going to have benefits elsewhere. And I think that coordination from the OPP has been significant as well.
As optimistic as we can be based on the numbers in this report, again, going back to what you mentioned initially, it's not as though we should, stop all efforts to combat what is not, as we've already identified, a victimless crime. So what should folks know, Brian, about the measures they can even take, perhaps personally, to protect themselves and their property?
Yeah, and we call it a layered approach. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to turn your vehicle into Fort Knox, but if you can add some layers that makes it more difficult for the criminal to steal your vehicle, less of a target. Park in a garage if you have one. Park in a well-lit area. If you don't, make sure your vehicles are always locked and the key fob or key is not in the vehicle. Use a steering wheel lock. Use a pedal lock. Use an onboard diagnostic port lock to prevent reprogramming thefts. Use a Faraday bag or the likes to protect that radio frequency. Use an aftermarket immobilizer. Use an aftermarket tracker. Any of those things can, not that they all can't be defeated, but it adds time and it adds tools that the criminals would need to be able to defeat them. So the more you can do, the less of your target is, of your vehicle is a target.
How will you and your association continue to work with law enforcement so that we don't lose sight of this issue?
Yeah, and I think law enforcement is very aware that they will shift, and we'll shift right along with them. It might not be exports that are at the peak. Maybe it's chop shops stealing the vehicle and chopping it up into parts and selling it piece by piece. So just making sure that we're aware of the trends and patterns, continue doing what we're doing, and more of it without realizing or making the mistake of realizing that we can shift our resources elsewhere. And there's no indication of that. And law enforcement is very aware that we need to continue to fight the fight, and all Canadians will benefit from that.
Brian, appreciate your time on the show today. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye now. Brian Gast is the Vice President of Investigative Services with Equité Association, reporting a 19% decrease in auto thefts across the country in the first half of this year compared to the first 6 months of 2024. And when you look in Ontario, you find one of the largest drops in auto thefts at almost 26%, followed by Quebec at a 22% decline in auto theft. This was something that we saw gathering momentum, particularly during the pandemic when supply chains were impacted to the point that they were, and we couldn't get our hands on the vehicles that we had personally ordered, for example. And we have since learned that this has been connected to organized crime. I read all kinds of incredible stories about people following a tracking device or phoning their own vehicle, finding it already on another, in another part of the world. That's how this was going. And it was, as I said at the outset, described as almost epidemic-like in its proportion. We were seeing so many auto thefts. And now in the first half of this year, we're seeing a fairly significant decline in that. It doesn't mean we should take our foot off the gas, so to speak, in terms of our efforts to combat auto theft, but we are certainly in a better place now than we were a year ago. So have we solved the problem? Have you been on the receiving end? Were you a victim of a car theft, even if somebody just took it for a joyride at one time? Would love to hear your story of if you've been a victim of a car theft or what you have done to protect yourself against it, because this was reported so widely. I'm sure many of us tried to get a little bit more careful in terms of the way that we took care of our property. 519-570-2545, star 570 1-800-570-5715. Have we solved the car theft problem? What are you doing personally to make sure you're not one of those victims, despite the declining numbers? This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
It's really combining efforts through intelligence, through enforcement. There's points in time where you had multiple police services at the Port of Montreal, many of them from Ontario, assisting the Sûreté and Montreal Police, working on projects collaboratively, joint forces operations, and they've been significant. Working collaboratively, knowing that what you do in one jurisdiction is going to have benefits elsewhere, and I think that coordination from the OPP has been significant as well.
Brian Gast is the Vice President of Investigative Services with Equity Association. Its latest report found a 19% decrease in auto thefts across Canada in the first half of this year compared to the same period in 2024. And the largest drops were found in Ontario and Quebec. Ontario car thefts down almost 26%. In Quebec, they're down 22%. So encouraging signs, to be sure, following what was described as a virtual epidemic about a year ago. 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. I won't forget anytime soon the conversation I had with a buddy when I was over at his place, and we were going to hop in the car to go out for a bite to eat. And when he gets in, he's taking the club, the good old-fashioned club, off his steering wheel. He says, "Do you have one of these yet?" I said, "No. I don't." He said, "I went back to it. There had been so many vehicle thefts in his neighborhood." And I don't want to make a particular area look bad. Maybe that was just, this was in our region. And, maybe it was just that time for that particular neighborhood. But anyway, he resorted to using the club as the best means of defense because friends who had alarms on their car, the alarms were disabled or whatever. The fobs were copied, all of those different things. He said the club was the best thing that he could do. And insurance rates were going up and he was frustrated by that. The club, the good old fashioned club, was the way to go for him. Another friend of ours ended up with their vehicle being stolen. It was at the time one of those vehicles that had been identified as one of the most sought after vehicles in thefts. And for them, I can't imagine. The only thing I can think of is that scene from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles when Steve Martin rents a car and then goes all the way out, gets off the shuttle bus, goes to the parking spot where the rental car is supposed to be, and the spot is empty. Our friends came back from a vacation, went to their parking spot at Pearson Airport, and their vehicle wasn't there. I can't imagine what that would be like, but that's what happened to them, taken right out of the parking structure at Pearson Airport. We've been pretty lucky, I guess, in light of this and the epidemic that it was. Good to see the numbers declining. We had a vehicle broken into in our driveway many years ago now, at a time just like the first friend I told you about who's now using the club. There were a lot of vehicle break-ins happening in our neighborhood at that time, and we were one of the victims of it. But the vehicle stayed. It's still super unsettling, of course, because somebody was in your personal property. Not fun. But I will also never forget, as a kid, I've told you before, my very first car was a 1969 Mustang. Not that I was born in the 50s and turned of age to drive in the 60s. I just bought a classic car, a classic muscle car, when I was a foolish young man with more money than brains. And I thought I'd just, build a car and whatever. It was fun. I wouldn't trade the experience for anything. I wouldn't mind still having some of that money. But nonetheless, I had just finished truly years of work on this thing, right up to a new engine, the body work, the paint job, etc. And it was sitting at a mechanic's place. The mechanic is no longer there. This is so many years ago. I mean, we're going back 30 plus years now. Anyway, it was getting some finishing touches, and I went by on a weekend and I didn't see it sitting in the lot where I usually had seen it. And when I went in on Monday to ask about my car, the owner of the shop had said, "Well, I thought you came and took it." I'm like, I didn't come and get my car. Somebody came and got my car, and that was the end of that. And to this day, if I see any classic Mustang that resembles mine. I wonder, is that it? Are any of the parts from my 69 Stang on your 69 Stang? I think I'm over it by now, but it took some time. Good to see in this report that the number of car thefts is declining across the country, with the largest drop reported right here in Ontario. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. JM Drama staging a production of Harvey at the Registry Theatre, and it opens tonight. Tim Farrell is the director of the show. Tim, let's start by talking a little more about JM Drama. Tell us more about it.
Okay, well, JM Drama was founded in 1983. At St. Jerome's High School in Kitchener, we had a wonderful theater program. We had great teachers, directors, and a lot of us had just fantastic theater experiences in high school. So in 1983, a bunch of alumni from St. Jerome's, the J, and St. Mary's, the M, founded this group so that they could continue doing community theater plays.
And still going strong to this day with a production of Harvey coming up at the Registry Theatre on July the 31st. What should we know about the show?
Well, it's a very, very funny show. The author, Mary Chase, wrote it during the Second World War. So the play's 81 years old. She wrote it at a time where she wanted to bring relief and comedy to people going through that really, really rough time. So it's a very, very, very funny play. People may recognize it because there was a very great version done with Jimmy Stewart. The lead character, Elwood P. Dowd, he's this really likable fellow, lives in middle USA, and he lives with his older sister and his niece, and his best friend is a 6-foot-tall, invisible white rabbit. So a lot of the comedy is that the sister is trying to get the niece into the local society scene and meet a man and get married, and Elwood and Harvey cause chaos in their plans. So that's where a lot of the comedy comes from, chaos that happens to these two people. So
it just so happens that I am also an alum of JM Drama, and I remember Mr. Kloss was the director of both of the shows that I performed in when I was at St. Jerome's High School. When you come back now as the director of a show yourself, are you drawing on any of the experiences you gained in high school?
Absolutely. And you mentioned Bill Kloss. He was heavily involved in a lot of the productions at our high school. And he was also one of the founding members of this JM Drama. And there's stuff that he taught me as an actor that I use today. I can hear his words when I was telling my actors how to read an audience, and it was just from Bill's very wise advice. So
yeah, it stands the test of time for sure. So Harvey, as I mentioned, opens July the 31st, runs through August the 9th at the Registry Theatre. How can we get tickets, Tim?
You can get tickets from the Center in the Square box office. You can go in person and pick them up there. Or else you can get tickets by going to the Registry Theatre's website and order tickets online through there.
Looking forward to another great show with our friends from JM Drama alumni. Tim, thanks very much for doing this. Break a leg at the show.
Thanks very much, Mike.
Tim Farrell, the director of Harvey, opening tonight at the Registry Theatre in Kitchener. The website of the theatre, if you want to get your tickets, registrytheatre.com, a presentation from JM Drama. All right, I've got to get you to the 570 News Center for an update. And then one of our Thursday morning traditions here on the show, a little bit of fun, take a break from the heavier stuff, and we'll have fun on the flip side. I'm taking my cue from you today. My buddy, who I affectionately refer to as Producer Mike, says, you should do this on the flip side one time. So we're doing this today, asking you about that bad habit of yours that you just can't break. I'll tell you mine if you tell me yours. On the flip side, coming up, this is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers. Thursday mornings at this time, we take a break from some of the heavier things that we talk about through most of the 20 hours every week on this show. Have some fun with a little something we call the flip side. And today, the question to you is a simple one. The bigger question is whether or not you are big enough to admit to it. Because it can be hard sometimes, can't it? but I've got no shame. Question being the simple question of what bad habit is it that you have that you simply cannot break? Like, for example, maybe you use and ah too much when you speak. Okay, so here's the thing. I should be nicer, but sometimes I can't help myself. I always just say what's on my mind. That was our Prime Minister. The parts that I edited out of his message yesterday about declaring Palestine a state. I was a little distracted from the message by the way in which it was delivered, but that might tie into one of my bad habits. I tend to talk too much, which serves me well professionally, I think, or I hope, not always personally. I work on that. I think there are times that I do a pretty good job of just sitting back, shutting up, listening instead of talking all the time. However, really, when it comes to the kinds of habits that I was thinking about when I brought this idea forward for the Flipside today, is those things like I do, and I'm kind of loath to admit it because I'm a man of a certain age now that should have at some point stopped this, but I haven't. I don't know if saying bite my nails is the accurate description of it. I tend to bend them a lot, though, sometimes to soften them up and loosen them. I will bite them. And I know all of the things about the nasty germs that are hanging out beneath my nails, and I still haven't been able to stop it. Like I said, most of the time, it's just a bend of the nail now, and then I just work it out. Like, what's the point of using a nail clipper when you're just sitting there on the couch or you're sitting there in your car and you can work the nail off all by yourself? And I think to some degree, this is connected to the mental aspect, the soothing aspect of, just working on that nail a little bit and bending it or getting it off. And sometimes, this is the one thing I've gotten better at over the years. Every once in a while, I do. I try to be conscious of this, but most often it's just getting to the nail clipper is far too great an effort. I'm just going to take care of this particular fingernail right here where I'm sitting today. Every once in a while, I do get to that nail clipper. I'm sure my beloved is thrilled to death when she sees me actually do that. But one of the things I have gotten better at over all of these years, which are now almost 54 that I've been biting my nails, is the way I dispose of them, right? They don't just get flicked around willy-nilly. I think as a kid, I probably did that, maybe dropped them behind the couch. I have no idea. But they get collected and disposed of appropriately, unless, of course, I'm driving my vehicle at the time. And if you ever see me open my window and drop something out, it's almost certainly one of my fingernails. This is gross, isn't it? Well, anyway, my buddy Mike asked, I said, yeah, we'll talk about it on the flip side. That bad habit that you have that you just can't break. 519-570-2545. Star 570 and 1-800-570-5715. What bad habit do you have that you try like heck and you just can't break? When I was a kid, I also was one of those thumb suckers, to the point that Mom got whatever that stuff was that they would put on your thumb so it tasted off when you sucked it. If you can still get that stuff, maybe I could apply it to my fingernails to dissuade me from continuing to pick away at my fingernails. But like I said, it's not always a biting of the nail. Sometimes it's just an appropriately timed bending of the nail until it's done. But if they've got something that would inhibit me from doing that, maybe it would be useful at this point. One of the other things I've been really trying hard to work on, and I don't know, like it's not the same kind of habit. Again, kind of going back to the beginning when I said if you're taking ums and ahs out of your language, it's not necessarily the kinds of habits we're looking at, like biting your nails, picking your nose. We see you do that some. When you're in the car, you're not in there by yourself, right? Unless you've got really dark tinted windows. Maybe that's the thing. Smoking would be another one. I did that for a very brief time when I was a teenager and was able to get over it. I think because I didn't do it for too long, but I know that's a habit that we often try to break. And the other one I was thinking of, and I've really been working hard at this because I've never met a food item with sugar that I didn't want to eat. And it's particularly difficult in the summertime when it's ice cream season. And I love me some ice cream. But really, just in general, cookies, chocolate bars. One of our coworkers yesterday brought in bags and bags of candy. Well, you know how hard it is for me to walk through the kitchen here at the radio station and not take some of the candy, which is still there from yesterday. I had a little bit yesterday. Some of the little licorice nibs, I absolutely did. Some jelly beans, absolutely I did. So far today, I've been able to avoid it. But I've been trying to cut back because I think I blame my parents. And why wouldn't I? Because it's far more convenient to blame somebody else for your problem, right? But I am the kind of person that when he finishes a meal, feels as though the meal must be capped off with something a little bit sweet for your palate, because I grew up in a house where dessert was a thing. It was a constant thing. It was a virtually everyday thing. You have your meal, you have your dessert, and almost always that dessert was a homemade dessert courtesy of Mom. So we had the cookies, we had the cakes, we had the pies, you name it. Sometimes we just had the store-bought stuff. Like, do you remember those Vachon cakes? That's what we called them. Vachon was the brand name on them. But they were a vanilla cake with chocolate covering and some caramel inside. Oh, my goodness gracious. Did we love those or did we love those? And then what were those other things called? Swiss rolls? Something. They were a cream-filled, chocolate-rolled thing, cakey thing. It was all delicious. So to this day, when I finish a meal, it's like, yeah, something's missing. Something's missing. Sometimes I try to curb that craving with just a hard candy to suck on, but most of the time it's, where are the cookies? Where's the chocolate? I'm trying very hard to cut back on that. But if I were being straight up about the worst habit that I have not been able to break, and I know that I should because I'm old enough to know better, it's got to be still at this age and stage of life to be biting and or picking at my fingernails. Farwell. There are these things called nail clippers. Use them. Maybe this is my message to myself to start the process of breaking this bad habit. Maybe you've been able to break your bad habit and you can give us some tips. What is the bad habit that you have that you just haven't been able to break? 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. Let me know. On the flip side, this is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Here's the big question. Can you retrain your brain to break a bad habit? And if you've been successful in breaking one, maybe you can help us out a little bit. On the flip side this morning, asking you about that bad habit that you have that you've just not been able to break. For me, it's biting my nails. I've overcome a few of the bad habits, smoking a long time ago. I'd like to really break my connection to sweet and sugary things because we know that the older we get, the less good those are for us. But come on, just everything in moderation. I'm working on the moderation part because once I start, oh my goodness gracious. But for sure for me, it's biting my nails. And so if you have a bad habit that you just can't break, maybe you can join me in this company because they say misery likes that. I'm not too miserable that I bite my nails. I just know that at this age, I probably shouldn't be anymore. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. Kim sends an email to Mike at 570news.com, says, Mike, they sell anti-nail biting polish at Shoppers. Kim, bless you. I might just stop there on the way home because I'm taking a road trip this weekend, and Lord knows the time in the car gives me time to pick at and otherwise bite my nails and then drop the fingernail out the window. As awful and gross as that sounds, I'm sorry. It's my bad habit, and I've yet to be able to break it, which kind of brings us around to the ways that we can actually go about breaking bad habits. Because it's easy to, let's say, okay, I want to write a list of the good things that I'm going to do, and I'm just going to immediately start doing them tomorrow. Like, I'm going to make healthy snacks. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm not going to waste time doom scrolling on my phone. You know, I'm going to finally read that classic novel. I'm going to house train the pet. You name it. And the next day you just go and do it, right? Well, no, that's not the way that it works. In fact, the Heart and Stroke Foundation tells us there are 6 steps to changing a habit. So if you're struggling with a bad habit that you cannot change, here are some ways that you might be able to go about doing that, including identifying the cues that cause you to do that bad thing. Something has to trigger it, right? Might be the stress that makes you crave the chocolate. The sound of your alarm triggers you to hit the snooze button. If hitting the snooze button is a bad habit, I'm guilty of that as well. I set my alarm 10 minutes fast so that when I hit snooze, it's still only the time that I'm supposed to be getting up, because I think it's a psychological thing. But the Heart and Stroke Foundation says if we identify cues, that it will help us understand what it is that puts our bad habit into motion. Then, step 2, we can go about disrupting that habit. Once you know the cue, you can throw the bad habits off track. If the alarm is what cues you to hit the snooze button, put the alarm clock on the other side of the room. Then you have to go all the way to the other side of the room to disrupt the snooze button habit. I don't know if I can I remove my fingers? Like, they're kind of always there, right? The third step on the way to breaking that bad habit is to replace what you're doing with something else. And what you want to replace it with is something more effective than the bad behavior alone. So the new behavior then interferes with the old habit and prevents your brain from going into autopilot. I was pretty good at this for a minute, and then I developed another problem. So chewing gum obviously keeps me from biting my nails. Always keep a pack of gum in the car. My problem is I love the cinnamon gum for whatever reason. I don't know why. I don't like hot, spicy things generally, but I like the cinnamon gum. I like the impact, if you will, when I chew into it. So I was almost every day, I'd leave work, get in my car, I'd put a piece of gum in my mouth. And after a while, I think it affected, like, that cinnamon gum. I think I chewed too much of it. I think it impacted my taste buds. I really do. Did something to the insides of my mouth, so I had to stop for a little while. I might just have to switch over to a different flavor of gum. Keep it simple. Step number 4 on the 6 steps to changing habits, says the Heart and Stroke Foundation. It's usually hard to change that habit because the behavior has become so easy and automatic. But the opposite is also true. New behaviors can be hard because your brain's autopilot area hasn't yet taken over the behavior. So simplify the new behaviors, and that will help them get integrated into your autopilot routine. So whatever you're replacing the bad habit with, make sure it's equally easy and simple to do. Think long term, number 5 on the 6 steps to breaking a bad habit, because the habits form because they satisfy our short-term impulses. And Heart and Stroke knows me. The way chewing your nails might immediately calm your nerves. I don't think I'm a stressed out guy, but apparently that might be the reason I said earlier. It's got to be that mental connection. There's something calming or soothing about bending and or biting at my nails. But those short-term desires often have long-term consequences, such as the nasty, splintered, chewed-up fingers that I currently have. So if we focus on the long term of trying to change those habits, it'll help me remember why I'm investing in the effort. Here's the thing. I'm no George Costanza, or was it Kramer? No, it was George who became the hand model, right? Does anybody really notice these things? This is something that I always wonder about. Like, do you notice when we meet how ugly my fingernails are? I don't know. I mean, I hope not. But if you meet me and we shake hands, you're like, that's an ugly fingernail. I promise you this. I'm rather particular / anal about washing, sanitizing, all of those different things. So you don't have to worry about the germy part of me oftentimes having my fingers in my mouth. And finally, persistence. It pays off when it comes to trying to break that habit. If you keep at it, your new behaviors will turn into those same habits. I'm thinking of what they say about working out. Is it if you do it 7 days straight, it's going to form a habit? Didn't they say the same thing once about eating that many olives and then all of a sudden you're going to like olives? I vaguely recall something like that. And I also remember, my late sister Luann, bless her heart, one of our CF babies, who tried this thing. And let's just say it didn't take. She still didn't like olives after consuming 7 in a row. Poor kid. She deserved way better than she got. John is with us on the phone. Good morning, John.
Good morning. Is this still Lord Farwell?
It is Lord only to you, my loyal subject, yes.
I see. Yeah. The only subject I'm good in is math, and you don't add up. Anyway, I thought there were scientific studies that prove that people who eat a lot of sugary treats are much sweeter than other people who turn into sourpusses. So you might take that into account.
I've tried, John, but then people meet me and they realize I'm a cranky son of a gun and it just doesn't work.
Well, you just need more sugar, that's all.
Okay, you know what? I'm game to try in that one, my friend.
I strongly recommend butter tarts myself.
I can get behind this. I should call you Dr. John. I can get behind this prescription.
Yes, that's it. And I've worked in psychology in university, so there you go.
All right. Thank you, doctor. I appreciate it.
You're quite right. One nut to another.
I will take any excuse in the book to continue feeding my craving for sugar. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. If you were listening earlier today to Living Retired, our regular Thursday morning segment at 10:30 with Gary Chalk, he writes a humor column called Living Retired. We have some fun with it on the show every Thursday morning. And I was watching an old episode of MacGyver last week, and in the end credits, Gary Chalk's name came up. So I took a picture of it, and you can see it on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Mike Farwell Show. But I sent it to Gary. I said, look, I didn't know you had a background as an actor. Of course, it was just somebody with the same name. But Gary and I had some fun with that today. And he said to me before we did the segment, Google yourself and see what comes up. And so I did, and I found myself as the owner of a fancy cafe in Pasadena, or an assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania, or even a doctor of internal medicine in Charlotte, North Carolina. But the most interesting thing I found when I Googled myself was, like, I honestly think somebody did that. I think somebody .com'd me because there's a MikeFarwell.com, and the page takes you to Strategic Public Relations Solutions. But it's a very strange page that I don't think does anything. I mean, there's content on it, including a time-lapse video of a cold winter day. I don't know what that's got to do with Strategic Public Relations Solutions. And it says the hours of work are 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Well, if I had a strategic public relations company, I wouldn't just be working 9 to 5. Like, who is this Mike Farwell anyway? I just think somebody bought the domain and put some generic stuff on there because the site doesn't do anything. But MikeFarwell.com certainly exists. I click the Get Started button. It doesn't take me anywhere. Our mission is to elevate brands through strategic public relations. I don't know. It's interesting what you find when you Google yourself. I'm going to get you an update from the 570 News Center, and then Talkback begins for another day on the Mike Farwell Show. MikeFarwell.com. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak,
Don't talk back.
Just finish cleaning up your room. Let's see that dust fly with that broom. Get all that garbage out of sight. Or you don't go out Friday night. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
It is your daily Talkback Hour, a chance for you to share thoughts on an issue that we've discussed on the show today. Maybe you didn't get a chance to weigh in earlier, or you've got something else entirely that you would like to bring to the table. You make the call, we'll answer. I'm all ears, and let's just find out where the direction takes us today. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. We'll start with Jersey Bill. Good afternoon, Billy.
Hey, hello. Well, first I'd like to say I really appreciate Rogers, the way it's covering the tournament that I guess it's a major sponsor of, the tennis tournament, both the women in Montreal and the men in Toronto. It's really great to see that tennis, even though some of the big men, guys on the men's side haven't shown up. But what was really interesting last night was that great match with Jeannie Bouchard and her retirement. I think it was all handled very nicely. And I wish she would have had maybe a longer and better career, but it worked for her, and she certainly she played great last night, even though she lost. And as I say, the whole thing was handled very nicely at the end.
Billy, great point, and appreciate you bringing it forward. The challenge that has always been with the National Bank Open, formerly the Rogers Open, is getting those big names into the draw. But it's funny that you bring this up because my good buddy and I go to this tournament almost every year. We took a little hiatus from doing it. But anyway, we've gone many, many times over the years. And every year we go, we say, we should go to the tournament in Montreal one of these years. Like, we always go to Toronto, and, you know, it just seemed like a good idea. And wouldn't you know, this is the year where I guess I'll just let the cat out of the bag. I'm taking an extra long weekend again, just like I did at Canada Day, so we can get on the road and be there for the match tomorrow night. And so my buddy and I were actually watching last night the Jeannie Bouchard match and hopeful that she would win so we could see her play on Friday, which I think would have been her next match, because last year when we went in Toronto, we saw Milos Raonic in his return. He had just come back from injury or whatever, and we saw a great match, and Milos won, and it was a terrific night at the tennis. So we thought, if we could see Jeannie on her farewell tour, but not to be. It's just not to be for us. And it was still, as you mentioned, just a great tennis match last night. But we're looking forward anyway to spending some time in Montreal. As much as I dislike their sports teams, I love the city. So looking forward to that. Afif, Good afternoon. You're on Talkback.
Matthew Alachar.
Okay.
What I wanted to say is, like, Matthew Alachar is in Toronto Maple Leaf. Man.
Yes, he was a seventh-round draft pick. You're right. Kitchener Ranger gets drafted by the Leafs. You got to love it.
That's all why I want to say, because I'm just happy that he's there now. I kept on hearing his name, like, you know, when you were calling during the games, and now he's with the Leafs, which is awesome.
All right. Well, he's been drafted by the Leafs, a seventh-rounder at that. So let's remember, it's a bit of a hill to climb to get into the National Hockey League. But yes, when your name gets called in that draft, you are now property of. And I'm personally looking forward to Matthew Alachar back with the Kitchener Rangers this year and seeing what he can do in the OHL to help his future prospects in the NHL. So I'm with you. I'm right behind the kid all the way. Next to Willie. Willie, you're on Talkback. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Happy that it's not 400 degrees outside today. A little bit of a cooler day.
It is a little fresher, yes.
Yeah. I wanted to chime in on the speed cameras and the school safety zones and all that kind of stuff.
By all means.
I really question I'm not a big fan of the 30 kilometers an hour, because you might as well get out and push your car if you drive any slower. But what's the point in having a 30 mile an hour or 40 kilometer an hour enforced at like 8 o'clock or midnight? You know, if it's a school zone, I don't think there's a lot of schools that are taking students at 8 o'clock or at midnight. And, you know, I've seen so many people that have got tickets at that point. So that really supports the money grab versus the schools versus the safety issue. I wish they spend as much time teaching, the kids these days look both ways before crossing the street, like when we were kids, when, that was pumped into us all the time. And I'm not I don't mind speed cameras. I wish they would put them on the Conestoga Parkway so you get some wingnut who's driving at 160 down the parkway that gets a ticket instead of the guy that's driving 42 kilometers an hour through a school zone.
Willie, you're preaching to the choir, my friend. Yeah. I could not agree more. We had a call the other day. You talk about the Conestoga Parkway as an example. How about Homer Watson Boulevard, which has a limit of 70, but people are probably doing more than 100. Put a speed camera there too.
Oh, exactly. Well, the other day I had two vehicles, or a vehicle and a motorcycle. I was doing I think 95 or 100 or something like that down the parkway, and one was doing at least 150, and one was probably doing 170, weaving in and out of traffic like a wingnut. So that's what the speed camera should be catching in my mind. That's a far bigger menace than somebody driving 42 kilometers an hour in a speed zone. So, anyways,
I couldn't agree more. Thanks for sharing it.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. Listen, I've been down that road already this week. I was accused of flogging the issue, but Willie is absolutely correct. The way the system is set up currently, we're all speeders now. Imagine getting a ticket for driving 42 kilometers per hour. Give me a ding-dang break. Talkback continues on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Thanks, Jody, for the email to mike@570news.com. In case you are curious, Jody's not the first to email me about this. Conestoga Mall temporarily closed due to a power outage. Nothing sinister going on, just tough to run the mall without the power getting to the building. So that's why Conestoga Mall is temporarily closed. We'll keep you posted. Hopefully you can get your shop on sooner rather than later once they get the power restored. We've always got plenty of power from you during this Talkback Hour on the show. You call, start the conversation, and we'll see where it goes from there. Preston, Paul, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. Number 45, checking into the Farwell Force.
Attaboy, you're a force for good, Paulie. Good man.
Yeah, I know it's not too many people called at 11:30 with their bad habits.
You know what? I just got an email a moment ago from my buddy Ernie, 52 on the membership list of Farwell's Force, and he said, I guess I'm the only one with bad habits. I better get my stuff together here. See, nobody else wants to admit it, Paul.
Yeah, well, my whole life's been a bad habit, so I didn't know which one to pick. But,
you fit in just fine then with Farwell's Force, buddy.
You got her. But I like what the Jays picked up this morning. They got that Shane Bieber out of Cleveland.
The only thing I'm worried about is he's only made 4 starts in the past 2 years.
Something's better than nothing, and I just hope this Bieber's a little better than the other Bieber for the Toronto Maple Leafs. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
So you have yourself a great long weekend, Mike. Enjoy the tennis, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Paul. I'm looking forward to being back on Tuesday, and don't worry, the show is going to be here. Just because I'm not here doesn't mean the show will disappear tomorrow. You're still going to have the show. Unfortunately, you'll just have to grind the gears of somebody else tomorrow. I'm honestly not sure who's filling in. Nobody tells me nothing. But listen, I told them I'm not going to be here. You figure it out. And believe it or not, the show will go on. Kyle, you're on Talkback. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Going back to the LRT thing, do we add this to our list of bets we're going to have on what goes first, the LRT, the GO Transit, or Highway 7? Is this going to be one of those things we're going to add onto the list of bets?
I think it would be a fun one to add on. In my heart of hearts, I do believe it will get done. But the timeline, it's a good point, Kyle. What do we get first? All-day two-way GO, an expanded, improved, safer Highway 7 from Kitchener to Guelph, or Phase 2 of light rail? I'll put it on the list.
What's the odds? What do you think has better odds there? Our LRT?
I think the odds of LRT Phase 2 are better than either of the other two projects, yes.
Okay, too bad that they finished the 401 too, because we could add that to a list of what's going to be finished first there.
Well, hang on, Kyle. Is the 401 ever finished? No.
My dad said that when he first got his job in Kitchener back in like 1983 or something, he said they were still working on it, where they started working on it then, and that he was laughing because it's like he left and he came back and they're still working on the 401 at the time, and he was just like, oh my gosh, like it's never going to end, Kyle. It's never going to end. You might be old like my age by the time they finish it. And I was laughing. So, but yeah, I just was just curious if we should add the LRT to it. So I'm down. I'll I don't know. I think the LRT is good, but I don't think any of the rest of them are going to be even around in my lifetime, to be honest. And if it is, I'll be in a retirement home by the time it starts. So there you go, Mike. Thanks a lot, my friend.
All right, Kyle. Appreciate the call. You know, I am being uncharacteristically optimistic around Phase 2 of light rail. I like what Tony Schmidt of the Preston Town Centre BIA had to say when he joined the show earlier today. And again, just to be clear, like I want this for not just Cambridge, but for our community. However, as much as I'm willing to say that the likelihood of Phase 2 of light rail being greater than the likelihood of all-day two-way GO transit from Kitchener to Toronto or an expanded Highway 7 from Kitchener to Guelph, yes, Phase 2 light rail is likelier than those other two projects, in my opinion. But I don't know how confident I am, in all honesty, saying that Phase 2 is actually going to happen. $4.5 billion. I know we expect/want it from upper levels of government. I don't see checks of that size being handed out willy-nilly. Anyway, I'm not trying to be negative on the project. I'm just being honest. If you asked me today, will it happen? I'll say, sure, but I'll make it like a 60-40 in favor of yes, 60%, maybe no, 40%, 65-35. I don't think I'd give it a 70% chance of happening, me personally, right now, but I sure as heck hope it does. JB, you're on Talkback. Good afternoon.
I have a proposition for a segment for you.
I love propositions. Proposition me, young man.
Well, I'm thinking, since you can't seem to stop talking about the speed camera stuff, and it comes at different junctures in the show, allocate 15 minutes a day, call it speed camera sentiments, give people a chance to call in and complain, do your own complaining, etc. Then it solves the problem. We get it once a day, we get it out of the way.
JB.
That's me.
Listen, what do you think Talkback is?
Yeah, but you talk about it other times a day, too. Come on.
Well, I talk about it when it's an issue to be talked about, when there's something happening in it. I talked about it when the mayor of Guelph suggested we get a warning instead of a ticket. Willie brought it up today on Talkback. We moved on.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers. Get out of my kitchen. Everybody's a program director. I'll tell you what. You think this job is so damn easy? I'm not here tomorrow. You're welcome to host the show. I'm kidding. I love JB. We go way back, even in this business. And I understand. I do. I saw Dave's email. Dave's a good friend from way back. He said to me the other day via email, stop flogging this horse, the speed camera horse. I'm just bringing up issues when the issues are topical. And if somebody like Willie wants to call during Talkback and vent about the speed cameras, you know I'm here for it. I'll give you my 2 cents, and then we'll move on to the next 2 cents. That's what Talkback is all about. And I tell you this, I'll remind you again, the region's ears are listening. If it's the last thing I do, I'm telling you, we are going to get changes made to the speed camera program, because the way they're doing it right now is bogus. It's a scam. We're all speeders, and they just want to take our money. It's Talkback on the Farwell Show. I think I just put another 2 cents in the speed camera pot. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. And right back to the phones we go on Talkback today to say good afternoon to Sherry. Sherry, good afternoon. Welcome to Talkback.
Well, thanks, Mike. And my other half over here cutting bread for lunch is number 36, Francis.
Francis, number 36. Sherry, I've never heard from you before. Is this
No, you haven't.
Is this your first time calling?
I'm a first-time caller.
Yeah! Yes! Yes!
I love it, Sherry. I love it. Thank you. Welcome to the show.
Okay. A couple of points, okay? On the point that's being raised about what will come first or not with the rail and Highway 7 and all of that, we'll probably never see any of them in our lifetime, and because we're in our 70s now. But what always comes first, of course, is with new governments, the change of government and tax dollars available to deal with these things. You know they need it, but something always pops up in the meantime. So it'll be a long time in coming. Maybe the light rail first. I don't know, because there's too much competition for the rail lines that are there. But on to a different topic. This morning, you entertained conversation with Paul and your response to Paul. And you talked about Carney and his inability to put forward what he's saying. You know, my bad habit is that I always see the plus and the minus, and I can argue both sides. So bear with me. On the point of Carney and his ability to put forth thoughts, you can see him, if you watch his body language, weighing up how to put forth the best possible argument for a position. And I think he's gone a long way in his short term as Prime Minister in dealing with other countries, and his standing. We're now respected across the world, other than south of us. But I mean, he doesn't respect too many. And you argued, you know, the hums and the haws, and you put forward a good clip. And I mean, we heard them here too. But my history was as a court reporter. And I have to tell you, lawyers who are trained to argue a position and put forward their sayings, we could edit to the degree of eliminating the hms and the ahs and the duh, you know. And so having that position in history, I think, you know, walk a mile in his shoes and really listen closely to some of the good points he's making.
Sherry, I really appreciate that. I got to get to the news now.
That's okay, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. God bless, as Francis would always say. I'm going to pick up on that point. Sherry makes an excellent point, but I do have to get to news, and then we'll continue talk back on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. And the clock is the boss on this show all day, every day. But I do want to go back to what Sherry was saying just before that update from the 570 News Center with Matt, because I think Sherry made an excellent point around listening to Prime Minister Carney yesterday and also having the ability to watch him, which I did as well. And frankly, because this came in as breaking news while we happened to be watching the evening news, the late afternoon news. And so it was televised and listened and got to watch Prime Minister Carney at the same time. And after several minutes, I really did find myself starting to lose the message and get totally focused on the number of ums and ahs that the Prime Minister was uttering in his responses to reporters' questions. However, to Sherry's point, I think she was spot on in talking about the body language that she noticed. I think we noticed the same thing. There's no doubt in my mind that the Prime Minister is attempting to answer questions in a very thoughtful, if not thorough manner. My point in pointing this out, and I know it comes across as cruel or mean-spirited, but simply, let's talk about French, for example, something that we know the Prime Minister was not strong in. As Prime Minister, you have to have some command of both official languages. He is learning, has learned French. I am suggesting to all of the people around the PM, help him through this. He can be thoughtful without umming and ahhing as much as he did. So this will just give you an example. I shared this with you this morning, the Prime Minister's response to a question of whether or not the United States was consulted before Canada made the decision that it did and said it would, at the UN General Assembly this fall, declare Palestine a sovereign state. Here was the Prime Minister's answer.
The United States is the essential partner in peace in the Middle East and in many parts of the world. And we've seen that demonstrated. The president does take a direct interest in resolving conflicts and has with respect to a broader set of developments in the Middle East. So again, the United States, this president will play and continue to play a central role. Others have responsibilities, Canada included, responsibilities on the humanitarian side, responsibilities with governance and other aspects that we're supporting. And we make our own independent foreign policy positions. And when we see opportunities, when we see necessity, which is what we see in this case, given the retreat of the prospect of a two-state solution because of the facts on the ground, as I explained, when we see that possibility and we see the combination of an ability to influence because of our own voice and actions, but because of others and other processes that are being put in place.
That is a 55-second clip from Prime Minister Carney. And I did for the Prime Minister in that clip what I've done for virtually everybody that I've played back a clip for on this show. I've done some editing so that the message is more clear. In the case of, and I don't mean changing the context, I just mean in this case, there were so many ums and ahs through that 55-second clip that it turned into a 65-second clip. There were 10 seconds of ums and ahs I took out, and I did that so that you, as a listener, could digest the message a little more easily. I do that for everybody when I have the time to, and I did in this case. But I just want you to get a sense. Again, 10 seconds of time, and you just get so distracted by it. There were 18 ums and ahs in that one response from the Prime Minister. Here's what you didn't hear just now. I'm not trying to be unkind, but yesterday, while listening to the Prime Minister, I lost myself in all of the ums and ahs and then became focused on them. And I just think this is something that should be worked on because this is our Prime Minister. That's all. Take it as constructive criticism, please. I know that as a central banker, public speaking was probably not something you've had a chance to practice a lot. Now, as the Prime Minister, maybe we can start practicing. Just a thought from me as we continue Talkback. And Mike is with us. Afternoon, Mike.
Good afternoon. I think I'm number 23 or 24 on your list.
You must be Mike from Elmira. That's number 23, friend.
23? I'll try and write that down to remember.
Okay.
A quick thing on, I was going to talk about something else, but the umming and ahhing, it's funny you mentioned that because I've had some of your replacements that take over your show for you do it even worse than that. And so it's like, I wish they would you would tell your guys to not do all the umming and the breaks, the long gaps before they speak again. And so, again, this is about the skill set, just so you know.
No, I get you. I do not disagree. And I think, the Prime Minister should have access to the necessary tools to remedy this.
Yeah, I don't like the ums either. But I do like that he's not rushing ahead to say something stupid instead of
Fair.
Whereas
you're right. He is being thoughtful.
Right. He's trying to be thoughtful and slow it down. Maybe his brain just doesn't work as fast as the media wants. But yes, it's a skill that has to be fixed. So I agree with that. Good job. Couple things. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before, you shared something about Stephen Harper and some meaningful thoughts. Is that clip available anywhere?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, how available? How? In terms of, sorry?
To listen to? Like, is that someplace we can go on YouTube and listen to what he had said?
Yes. I'm trying to remember the name of the organization, but it was, I bet you if you Google Prime Minister Harper, Saskatchewan interview, something like that. Yes, the full 55 minutes. It really was interesting stuff, at least from where I was sitting.
I was blown away. I was so encouraged by it because it sounded like a maturity of a person that you don't get that kind of maturity much from politicians.
I couldn't agree more.
It's like, okay, please, everyone, listen to this and try and pursue maturity instead of fighting with your funny puns back and forth and digging at each other. I love that. Lastly, you were talking about the list of what comes first as far as the light rail and Highway 7.
And two-way all-day go.
Yeah, I think Highway 7 has been in the works and not everybody's paying attention. over by Frederick Street off of Becker Street. I've been watching the actual construction, tear-downs, rebuilds, and all that stuff that's going in. The piping has to be done first so they can tear down that bridge. And then it's on its way. It's just a slow process. It is in
Mike,
the work.
it's been 40 years.
I know that, but I'm just saying, you actually see stuff happening. It's like, cool.
I love your optimism. I love it.
Sometimes.
Attaboy.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Great call. Clearly an attentive listener. That's why Mike is number 23, official member number 23 of Farwell's force. We are a force for good and a force for change and a force to be reckoned with on this show as we continue Talkback. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Right back to the phones we go because Talkback is about you getting the chance to do that. Talk back to us. Ron, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Mike. How you been?
It sounds like number 32, official member of Farwell's force.
That's correct.
Attaboy.
So, I just want to talk about the Mike Kearney thing for a second, and I know that everybody kind of touched up on it, but as you know and as I know, I took an actual radio course back in the day, and I swear they beat the living out of you for saying and you know. So as a radio, when I was learning that, I learned that I don't say them as much as anymore, and I don't use them. But say the average person, you will notice if a person uses it a lot because you got that beaten out of you because it is what we are taught in the radio. Back when I was learning it, that you shouldn't use those because they're all catchphrases and it can slow down conversation, introduce other effects and such. As you just saw, and I'm just flipping myself, but.
No, I get it, Ron. And you're right. I might be more sensitive to it than the average bear. But again, it was just so distracting for me. And I think there's an opportunity here for some improvement. So.
Oh, definitely. But I'm just saying, like, sometimes we're being a little bit more harsh because we had it beaten out of us. And I can see that being I can see that maybe it was more of a crutch. It could have been also that he might have been going off the cuff for all we know.
He was, but you need to be able to speak eloquently and deliver your message off the cuff. You have to.
I get that.
Okay.
It's just something I kind of noticed that I think you're being a little harsh on, but I understand where you're coming from, too.
Yeah. No, and listen, Ron, I appreciate that because you're right. I recognized... this popped into my head yesterday while listening to the Prime Minister, and I said, well, I'm going to do it because that's how I do this show. I share with you my honest opinion on things, and I know it comes across as mean-spirited, and I accept that criticism too. If you think I'm being a jerk, tell me, and I get it. But if I were in the Prime Minister's inner circle, I would absolutely address this because, as you heard Ron describe, beaten out of you is an interesting turn of phrase, but it can be corrected. Simple as that. Steve, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So I'm so glad you brought this topic up because this has always been one of the things that's driving me nuts about listening to your show, no offense, or even just listening to our past Prime Minister. Or you find it more and more everywhere. I find the poor language skills are even more prevalent in the younger audiences. Like when you have a younger guest on, like I don't want to name anyone in particular, but you have a lot of things on where you have younger representatives speaking for like regional stuff. And I find it even with them. And I think that the whole public speaking and the ability to convey messages, information, opinions, facts, everything, it's a lost art in that people can't seem to do that. And I don't know if this is a last 20 years thing with the emergence of social media, but it seems anytime somebody wants to communicate effectively, they don't just speak facts. They don't just speak to an audience. They're almost looking for approval. So they're instead of giving information, everything they say turns into a question. You know what I mean? And everything. And then you get the whole Valley Girl sound to a conversation where, and, you know, we want to bring people indoors and out of the homelessness, but it's really hard to do. Right? And it is so tiring and it is awful to listen to. But I find that, you know, any speaker, they're just not prepared. And like I say, when they're trying to convey information, it's more about gaining approval and acceptance of what they're saying rather than just presenting fact and leaving it as that. So
Got to put that out there.
All right, Steve. Appreciate that. I can't say as though I've heard the Valley Girl sound, to use your phrasing on that. Also, when we bring guests onto the show, newer elected representatives or younger, one of my hopes in that is that it builds their repertoire in answering questions, in being on a live show. I'm not going to be overly critical, and recognizing that I am in this particular case because it's the Prime Minister. I'm sorry, but once you attain that office, I would like to think this is one of the things, and he's still relatively new as Prime Minister, so let's just work on it. And I think anybody locally would be as well. Generally speaking, I'm more than impressed with the vast majority of guests who are on this show. Conservative Charlie, you're next on Talkback. Good afternoon.
Mike, you didn't do anything wrong. This guy's supposed to speak for all the Canadians, and he babbles on like that. I thought you were bang on. And one other thing, the previous caller says, Canada's back on the world stage. Really? Well, I guess the Prime Minister, Sammer and Macron, they must be thinking, what is this guy doing? We had a deal with Trump before we recognized Palestinians as a state. He didn't. He could have waited a few more weeks. Whoever suggested that he make that statement now, I think was way off base, Mike.
All right, Charlie, appreciate the call. Certainly, the timing doesn't appear to help our efforts at the negotiating table on a new trade deal. But as I said earlier, I would submit to you that this was an inevitable declaration on the part of Canada and our Prime Minister, because it's just become overwhelming, quite frankly, the images we're seeing out of the Middle East in terms of the impact of the aid not getting to the people who are waiting for it. So maybe this is a matter of principle that the Prime Minister and Canada took this position even before reaching that deal with the U.S. Talkback continues here on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Final minutes of Talkback today for us before we turn you over to Rob Snow, and now you know. So let's get right back to the phones. Frank, good afternoon.
Yeah, hi, Mike. I don't call very often because I guess I'm not a member of your club and I can't get in very easily. But just a couple of quick points. Putting aside the terrible delivery by Carney, nobody seems to be talking much about how stupid the decision was, particularly to announce it the day before we don't have a trade deal and really get Trump stirred up. I can't believe how silly and naive that kind of a decision and announcing it is. And I hope you get somebody on next week to talk about it. I'd love to hear from Peter Wollstonecroft. We just shot ourselves in the foot big time again. And some of my hopes, even though I didn't vote for him for Carney early on, have just fizzled right out. The train is stopped dead. The engine is dead. Anyway, thanks, Mike. Have a great trip to Montreal.
Thanks, Frank. I really appreciate that. And just so you know, if you're not an official member of Farwell's Force, you're welcome in this club any day, anytime. We're on 9 to 1 every day. You call. I know sometimes it can be tough to get through, but you're welcome. You're always a part of our club. Ernie, good afternoon.
Hey, just a quick little rant here about can we bring back plastic straws, Mike? I got 3 kids with their juice box water thingies, and if they want to put them in themselves, and if they make a little bend, it breaks or it cracks. These things are so annoying, and parents agree with me. Can we just bring back plastic straws, please?
Okay. Thanks, Ernie. Listen, sure we can. Talk to the Prime Minister or something. But that's what Talkback's for. Bring up whatever issue it is that's grinding your gears today. Chafing your chaps. Plastic straws. I can't get over the texture of the paper ones myself, but I can cope. I haven't tried sticking one into a juice box, so I don't drink a lot of those anymore. Grant, you are going to get the last word on Talkback today.
Okay, well, you had the flip side about your bad habits. I would like to think I'd like to buy stuff and more stuff and put it and bag it in my car and think, all right, I got this under control, and then, oh, no, I got more stuff now. And
Oh, you're a shopaholic. You're a hoarder, are you, Grant?
And the car used to look brand new. Now it looks like I don't know what, right? And
You fill it up with too much stuff. That's why, Grant. I'm sorry to cut you there, but I am fresh out of time. I said it already earlier this hour. The clock is the boss on this show. So I'm going to make way for Rob Snow. And now you know that will carry you through until 3 o'clock this afternoon. And then Aaron Anderson and Paul McPhee will be here with all news afternoons. I am taking an extra long weekend, but I'm looking forward to coming back on Tuesday. Make sure you come back tomorrow and be nice to the substitute teacher. I know you will, because you are a force for good. My name is Mike Farwell. Bye.